Hello and welcome to Daily Spark TV. I am Dr. Angela Chester. You know what we want to do: enlighten, inspire, and empower you to be your best self. My guest today is Chuck Robertson, and we're talking about the importance of youth. Let me tell you a little bit more about Chuck. He was raised in Southern California, became a Christian while in senior high school. Now he has worked with youth ministry as well as the California Forestry. He's also the author of A Simple Man's Guide to Esther and A Simple Man's Guide to Ezra. Thank you so much, Chuck, for being on the show today.
Thank you, Dr. Angela, for having me.
The importance of youth. I think that we can all agree that it is truly important that the youth are involved, that we are involved in their lives, and that they're involved in ours as well. One question that I would like to ask is that for a while there, when you talk about your life, you say that you kind of drifted a little bit away from the church, and you had that time period where you were trying to figure out who you are. I think our youth can kind of relate to that as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, I started out, like I said, as a 17-year-old senior in high school at a Wednesday night meeting for the church I went to, and it was quite impactful. And at first, I really started getting into it and reading the Bible. And for the first couple of years, I did great. And then I moved out of the area and away from the normal things. And when I came back, 6-7 months later, I lived in a different area, so I wasn't able to go back to the same church, meet with the same people, and just slowly started drifting away because I didn't have the impetus, I didn't have the reminders, and I didn't have the same people. And it tended to drift me away, and also some bad choices. And then was brought back by a minister who actually asked me to come with him and to this Bible study he was going to. You know, and unfortunately, like many people, to go along strong for a long time, and then all of a sudden things will happen, and again, more bad choices, moving or whatever. It's ups and downs.
Right. Just having those ups and downs. Now, when we talk about youth, we've noticed that there is a current trend. That is that the youth seem like they are kind of pulling away from the church more and more. Yeah. So this is more than just our millennials. These are also, when I say teens, our young people, I'm including our younger teens as well. Why do you think that is? Now, I know that we don't have all of the answers, but why do you think that our young adults and our young people are choosing to kind of do their own thing?
Oh gosh, there's so many reasons. And that's not something I've given a lot of thought to. But as I look at it and think about it, I think part of it is the churches and how they are presenting the gospel nowadays. And I mean, when I was growing up, it was very straightforward. It wasn't quite the fire and brimstone preaching, but you just got it. And even the Sunday school classes I went to as a kid, you got the stories. And, maybe you'd get a really anime teacher who would have puppets or something of that nature, and to make it interesting. And as things have progressed, society has changed, and then we got the MTV, and we got all these different things. Churches think, oh, well, we're going to have to compete with that. We got to keep the kids wanting to come here. So they started making the presentations in different ways, trying to keep the kids interested. And after a while, the kids don't see the difference.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's just like, it's just like a thing. Story's a little bit different, but they don't, they're seeing the razzle-dazzle and everything, and not getting the story and understanding the reasons, you know, and so part of the presentation is the problem. Other parts of it is just that they're more restless and more interested in the things of the world, things that are going out, skating, getting on the board, going, you know. So there's a lot of things that are involved in it. You can't put really one place.
Okay. You know, I was going to ask you the same question about the adults that are out there as well, and that's anyone, let's say, over the age of 30. It seems like it might be a little bit of that as well. The razzle-dazzle kind of wears off, and they too are deciding not to attend church or be churched as often. Have you found in your research and just your conversation with others, are there any differences between our youth and our adults as to the reason why they're just not participating in church anymore?
Well, there's definitely differences in reasonings. Some of the adults are kids who grew up and just are rebelling against all of that. And then, of course, we had when I was younger, we had the hippie movement, and then you had all the Indian, the transcendental meditation, and all these different religions coming up, and now it's more and more of them, and then you got all these cults coming in to distract them. So they got distracted by different things, and some of them became, they're all the same.
Right.
One God is the same as another God, and so in that sense, the enemy, Satan, has done a good job in promoting nothing and taking away any desire you might have for God, or distilling it, I should say, not taking it away. So
that is such an interesting point. That's right. Things are still the same, just a different time. A distraction is a distraction. Well, it is time for us to take a very short break, but when we get back, we will continue this conversation about the importance of our youth. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark TV. I am here with Chuck Robertson, and he is the author of A Simple Man's Study to Esther and A Simple Man's Study to Ezra. So we're talking about the importance of youth and making sure that our youth know that they're important to us as well, that we haven't forgotten about them, or that we don't want to be bothered with them. So my question for you is that you decided at a particular point in your life that you would work with the youth more, that you would kind of devote some time to them. Why did you feel that that was the thing to do at that moment?
Well, initially it wasn't a decision to do it. It was I was invited to a existing Bible study home group that consisted of middle school kids, along with about 6 other 19, 20-year-olds, who, and myself, being a new Christian, we went there basically just to listen, and we started getting involved with the leader of the group, and several of us ended up living in the house and becoming a part of it. So a couple of us led worship, and then as time went on, we were talking with them. And being older, they would immediately come to us and start asking questions, assuming that we knew more than they did, which sometimes we did, sometimes we didn't.
Right.
And it just continued. And then when I was drafted, which shows you how old I am, it ended a long time ago, I ended up working for forestry department instead of going into the military. And while up in Northern California, went to the local town, got involved in a church there, and ended up teaching the junior high classes there. And which was wonderful, because I ended up getting involved with high school kids as well, and meeting their friends from other churches. And without even trying or thinking about it, I met some of the other youth leaders. They ended up forming a baseball league amongst the churches. which they hadn't had before. There was always, this church and that church, and they didn't do anything in between. And, I was up there with a friend, and we started talking, well, why don't you guys, get together, do something, with these other churches. And, of course, people we know was talking to the kids, hey, and so they ended up doing
awesome.
Things. And then when I came back to Southern California, to my home, the church I was at, and got involved with teaching the youth there again. And by that time, it just was the thing for me to do. I was just so used to it.
I love that. Now, when we're working with youth, are there any things in particular that we need to remember to do, flip side of the coin, or not to do when we're working with our youth?
Oh, yeah. I'm no expert, but first thing I have to remember is that they're inconsistent.
Okay.
They're restless and relatively short attention spans. So if you're going to be dealing with them, you have to try and make it a topic or present it in such a way that it would garner some interest in them. I found that in some of the classes, some Sundays, I would say, okay, I don't have a plan, lesson or anything. What do you want to talk about? And, we'll talk maybe about problems at school, problems at home, or they'd ask questions. Okay, let's see what it said. So, and I found it helps to keep them involved or keep their attention if you keep them involved. If you've got a plan, you're presenting something to them, and you'll ask them questions periodically. Or when I was working with a younger group, my wife and I would try to involve them. This church had some schedules and stuff, but I didn't always like their plans, so I'd ad lib. And we'd get them. One time I tried having them act out of. We were reading a story out of the Bible and say, okay, I need you to you're going to play this guy, and you're going to play this person, and you're going to play this, to try and get them involved in it.
Right.
Not just sit there and have them watch a video.
Right.
Not sit there and just read it to them. They're going to go, or start talking to each other and joking around, which is even worse. So you get them involved. You keep them active. You keep them a part of it.
Right.
And then, besides, they tend to remember it more. And not just, oh yeah, I got to play so-and-so. Well then, okay, that reminds them that this was a story about.
Right. Right.
That's what I found. The things don't talk in monotone today, we're going to study, because they'll be snoring before you finish the first sentence.
I like that, because nobody really likes a lecture, right?
I sleep through them. I don't know why they won't.
That's right. I love it. I love it. Now, one thing that we tend to forget about as we mature is that we were once teenagers ourselves, and the things that we did. We tend to remember it maybe a little differently. One thing that we hear when dealing with youth is that they need to, and then people say, stop doing this or be more this way and all of that, right? Now, what I would like to do is kind of pick your brain a little bit about how are we really different, the youth of yesterday and the youth of today. But first, we need to take a short break. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Chuck Robertson, and I've written A Simple Man's Study of Ezra and A Simple Man's Study of Esther. And in these books, I've tried to make them understandable for those young Christians and for the new Christians and people who aren't used to studying. So it's written in a relatively simpler style, not the real intellectual style, so that you can enjoy it and fully understand it. And these are available at Westbow Press, at Barnes & Noble, at Amazon, anywhere that you want to look, I hope. So if you want to learn more about the Bible and learn how to see God in the Scriptures, find His character, find His personality, then pick up A Simple Man's Study of Esther or A Simple Man's Study of Ezra. Thank you very much.
And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark TV. I am Dr. Angela Chester. My guest today is Chuck Robertson, and he has written 2 really great studies, one on Ezra and one on Esther. Now, we're talking about youth and getting them involved and helping them understand that there is a spiritual world out there that wants them involved too, not just a secular world. My question before we went to break was, are we really that different? So the teens of yesterday, whenever your yesterday is, and the teens of today, is there really a big difference, or do we just think there's a difference?
I don't think the teens, the kids, the individuals are different so much as the world and society is different. They're still the same. They still have the same curiosities. They still have but they have more interests, more different interests. There's obviously more things for them to do, and so many of them are stuck on their iPhones that they can't see where they're walking half the time. I love watching them because I watch them and say, okay, they're going to hit the pole or aren't they? Or are they going to run into me? Because they're doing, and so that is a distraction that is awful. And I doubt that they're listening to sermons. Although they're available, they're not going to be listening to them. So I think the people aren't the difference. It's the society and the things available to them that are different.
Right. That is so true. Now, when we talk about intergenerational relationships, making sure that we're aware of each other, I don't think that people are very in the moment of grandmother's here, mom is here, and son is here. You don't think of it being intergenerational. But when we have our family gatherings or we're in church, when we have those moments where we get to be together, is there anything that we can do to make sure that we are having the best time that we possibly can without us separating out into our own generation?
Oh, golly, is there anything we can do? That depends entirely on the family and how they've been brought up, starting with the grandparents, how they brought up their children. And then was that carried over in some ways to the next generation as to how important family is? Plus, are they all still around? You know? It's like, well, I got 3 kids, 2 of them live over here and only one's here, so we only have one available at dinner, you know. Right. And so you so many differences, but I think it's basically the way family is raised and how they're taught as kids to interact with not just the parents, but with their grandparents, with their siblings, you know, and one of the things I personally think is lacking in some families is a lack of respect for the older. Oh, hi, Grandma, and they're gone.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a hi, Grandma, and go over, spend a little time, kiss them, say hello. You know, it's just a wave as they run by.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if they had been raised, you know, taught a little bit better, you know, well, not better, but differently about how important their grandparents are and how we should, you know, take a little bit of time for them. I can't say this from experience because, A, I didn't know my grandparents.
I see.
And I don't have any children, so I don't have to worry about introducing to my parents. But still, you know, like being raised with close friends and watching them raise their families and seeing how some very little, what you would call dysfunctional now, others very close, it makes a difference.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it does create that bond with the people that you do interact with, be
Yeah,
it that they are
definitely.
blood related to you or simply a neighbor or a really great friend. It really does make a difference. Now, you have, as I mentioned before, you've written a book, in fact, 2 books, about a biblical character. When you relate, be it that it's Esther or Ezra, to the youth that are trying to learn, how do you make it fun? How do you make it apply to modern times? How do you pull them in and they say, oh, that's that's old stuff?
That's a good question. A difficult question, but a good question. You can, all of it's going to depend on how you present it. And each of those stories is so totally different that you're going to have to use a different method on each one. If you want to, like Ezra is more of a character study as well as a history book. But if you want to talk about Ezra, you would talk a little bit about Ezra. How I would see it is, you talk a little bit about that story, or about Esther, or about Ezra and his character. And under this situation, he did this, and then we see it again over here on this situation. And you can turn around and say, now, if you were in that situation, what would you do? How would you handle that? Again, asking the questions, bringing them into it, and then relating it to some similar thing. Okay, if you were at school and you saw this, how would you handle it? What would you do? And trying to relate it to things that they're familiar with. Each one, like I say, being a different story, you've got to come up with different ideas or different things, and how they could relate to them.
Well, thank you so much for reminding us that we need to be creative when we deal with our youth, that we need to be patient and understanding, and also maybe a little kind as well. But at the same time, we're showing them what they should do, and they're helping us to keep doing what we're supposed to do. I love it. What a great reminder. Chuck Robertson, thank you so much for being on Daily Spark TV today.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Angela.
And thank you for tuning in. I hope that I have enlightened, I hope I have inspired, and I hope that I have empowered you to not only be your best self, but to inspire a young person or a young adult that's in your life as well. Until next time, everyone, be blessed in the Lord. Bye-bye.